Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. I'm Biola Labi.
And I'm Oji Akpe.
The World Bank and sister organization, the International Monetary Fund, have been making their views known about Nigeria's economy, particularly concerning matters that continue to resonate very close to home, like the subsidy on the price of petroleum products. To try to make sense of this and more, we're now being joined by Kamar Bakrin, a principal investor, and Muda, Yusuf, Director General, Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much and good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
We wanted to start by start out talking about some of the top line reporting that happened last week on the sidelines of the World Bank spring meetings in Washington, D.C. One of the things that came very clear was the echoing concern about the Nigerian economy. And furthermore, I saw some interviews with Christine Lagarde, where she didn't only just talk about Nigeria, she talked about sub-Saharan Africa generally and some of the concerns there, especially around growth. The projected growth for Nigeria is around 3%. Most people have said Nigeria needs to be in the double digits when it comes to GDP growth. I wanted to talk to you, I wanted to just get a sense from you on what were some of the things that concerned you about the report. The number one thing that came through was obviously the conversations around the fuel subsidy removal and how those funds can be better used, and also the use of our sovereign wealth funds. Just before we start, I would like to get some sense from you what you thought about those reports, and sort of almost some of them were quite damning when it came to Nigeria's ranking, especially on the sovereign wealth fund. I'd like to start with you, sir.
First, the IMF is like a certification body, like an economic certification body. So I think part of the mandate they have is to take a critical look at how the economy is managed and make proposals. Because if you want to relate with the international financial community, you need a kind of endorsement of the IMF, that certifies that you are managing your economy well. And if there are gaps, of course, they will point it out. It's like a patient that goes to see a doctor. Mm-hmm. You don't go to see a doctor and expect that they are going to be having a glass of wine or tea.
You're not going to get a full bill of health.
Yes. You are going there for, a therapy, injection, which most times will be bitter. So I think part of the issues that were raised are things that we have already been talking about around here.
Sure.
Nothing really new. Mm-hmm. They talked about issue of debt and debt sustainability, especially the high cost of financing the debts. They talked about issue of governance in the oil and gas sector, which in part led to the issue of this subsidy that they talked about. They talked about the issue of the management of our foreign exchange markets. We have been talking about issues of multiple rates. They also talk about issues of forex restriction, which is neither here nor there. There's a lot of debate around it, whether the approach of the CBN is the right approach. And they talk also about the issue of revenue mobilization, because revenue is a big issue right now with government. Government is not able to fund a lot of its basic obligations, in terms of either providing utilities and supporting some of its agencies. So revenue is a big issue, and this has been acknowledged even by the president himself. And I think right now the government is looking at how that can be improved upon. So these are issues,
so there was no new news.
Nothing new. They also talk about infrastructure. These are things that we have been talking about every now and then. What can make the difference is the political will to actually take some key decisions, to address some of these fundamental issues that were raised by the IMF. Some of them can be very difficult to tackle from the political point of view. Some of them, maybe because of some vested interests, there are a lot of resistance to some of these things. So there are still a lot of conversation to do around all these issues.
I'd like to get your input on the meetings.
Actually, I think Mr. Yusuf has captured a lot of it. I was actually quite surprised by the the seeming almost political connotation that the report was beginning to take. I mean, it's fairly standard. It's programmed. It's scheduled. So there's nothing untoward. I mean, because there was some noise about how or why all of these comments all of a sudden. It's like, come on, get serious. This is pretty. This is their job. Yeah, and it's also regular. And just to pick on a point. Mr. Yusuf made about this concern about the sustainability of our debt. I mean, while one often quotes the fact that Nigeria's debt to GDP ratio is relatively low, that is a very simplistic reading of the situation, because we also have to take into cognizance government's revenue, which drives the ability to actually service the debt, which brings back the whole, which sort of like brings focus on the whole thing around sort of like mobilizing revenue for government. And this is something that needs very, very serious sort of like, attention, the ability. And I think we will discuss that in the course of this, how we need to think about the whole tax, sort of like the whole tax strategy. Let me not say tax administration, but the whole tax strategy is something we really need to look at as a country.
I want to take you on the political undertone that you just mentioned now. So last week, the IMF also ranked Nigeria as the second lowest, worst economy in terms of its sovereign wealth management as well, right? Yeah. And so I know that last week we also had the CEO of NSIA came here, and he also kind of debunked the data that was provided by IMF, saying that the data had no correlation in value, and they were from two different agencies and not from the IMF. I'd like to, hear your take on that. Okay,
I don't want to sort of like create an unnecessary controversy. I mean, I think Uche actually did address the issue quite well. There was a bit of a mix-up as to exactly what the IMF, the World Bank, what they were actually talking about. Really, the issue was around the management of the ECA. Yeah, exactly. I mean, that was really the issue. And I think he tried to clarify that it wasn't so much about the administration of the sovereign wealth fund. Of course, there is the whole issue around whether such a fund should be managed internally or rather invested internally, since it's supposed to be a stabilization fund, versus whether like the common practice everywhere else. But this is not wholly writ, right? There's no one right answer of doing this, and therefore if you choose to do it a different way, I don't think that in itself necessarily creates unnecessary controversy or issues as such. So I think there was just that bit of a mix-up as to whether we were talking about the administration of the sovereign wealth fund versus the excess crude account. And I think he clarified that pretty well. I don't know, what do you think?
And yes, just to support what he said, the talk about the sovereign wealth fund, there were two angles. First, there is the issue of the confusion, which he mentioned, as confusing the sovereign wealth fund with the excess crude account. The excess crude account is not within the purview of the Sovereign Wealth Management Authority.
Although some argue it should be, but that's a different discussion.
Now, the Sovereign Wealth Management Authority have been very transparent in the way it manages. I know it has published accounts and all of that. So we really cannot question the quality of its management or its transparency. That have been very professionally managed, as far as I know.
Yes.
Secondly, I think part of the issue that was also raised by the IMF or World Bank is about the size of the sovereign wealth fund. Our sovereign wealth fund is about $2.5 billion. So when you relate that to the GDP, it's extremely small. On the score of that, which is not a transparency issue. It is more about the willingness of government to set aside funds to be invested in the sovereign, and also willingness about savings generally. That is not the responsibility of the Sovereign Wealth Authority. So on the score of the management of the Sovereign Wealth Fund, I think it has been very professionally managed. It has been transparently managed. So I don't agree with the position of the IMF on that at all.
But I think that also the IMF has done some backpedaling in the last in the last week, in which they then really focused on the excess crude account. I think that, and that brings us to another question, which is if you look at the excess crude account and the management of that, which there hasn't been a lot of transparency and there's been some governance issues around that. I'd like to get your opinion on that particularly. I think that Uche, who heads up the Sovereign Wealth Fund, has done a great job over the last few days of just shedding more clarity, raising a lot of transparency around how that fund is managed. I think everyone in Nigeria probably understands more about the Sovereign Wealth Fund now than they ever thought they would. But I think that what we haven't heard about is the excess crude account. I'd love to get a sense from you how you believe that is being managed and what you believe is the challenge there when it comes to transparency, which is really what the issue is.
Well, you know, there was a time there was even a debate as to the constitutionality of the excess crude account. Yes. Because what the Constitution says is that whatever revenue comes should be shared, between the three tiers of government. I'm not sure that has been fully settled or resolved. So that is. So the thing about the excess crude is about how first commitment to the principle of savings, which is very important, and that is actually what the Sovereign Wealth Fund is doing. Ideally, a lot of these funds should actually be moved into the Sovereign Wealth Fund for proper management, but that is not happening. So that's a major weakness in the way we manage the savings, or whatever we call the excess crude account. But
also the excess crude account has been, I mean, there has been criticism in the fact that money has been withdrawn from it without actual National Assembly approval.
Yes, well, these are constitutional issues. These are issues of checks and balances, which we need to take on at the level of either the judiciary or the National Assembly. Absolutely. You know, all those things should happen because this is a democracy. Yeah. And we should not allow a situation where an arm of government will just dip hands into the treasury and spend just anyhow. So that is an engagement issue between the National Assembly, the judiciary, and the executive. And having said that, you know, there are also some issues which I also need to express concern about as far as this IMF thing is concerned. First, there was a recommendation that we should impose more excise duty. Now, for those of us in the business community, the business environment for those in production is a very, very difficult one. And if you are talking about creating jobs, reducing poverty, building an inclusive economy, you need to do a lot more to encourage those who are in production, because they are the ones that pull a lot of resources, raw materials, labor, and all of that. And these things have a lot of trickle-down effects. So if at this time we are talking about revenue, and the thing we are now talking about is to increase excise duty, I won't agree with that. There's also a proposal that tax incentives should be stopped. You know, I know that there are these pioneer status and all of that. The fact that some of these processes are not being transparently managed is not a good reason to stop it. We should look at the principle of it. I mean, if you have a tax incentives, it is targeted at specific sectors of the economy. And it's to be able to grow the pool of investments in the economy and to create jobs. And all these are consistent with the economic recovery and growth plan and all the, the desire to ensure that we create jobs. But so also, I don't agree with the fact that, I mean, because perhaps there have been one or two abuses, then you have to stop tax incentives to investors. I think what is important is to be able to target it properly and know that whatever incentives you are giving is being transparently managed and is achieving the right kind of objectives. So these are some of the things which I also don't quite agree with. Then there's also the proposal that we should review VAT. Yes. It's part of the thing IMF said. There's been a lot of debate around that. But again, from where we stand, because of the challenges of the business environment, especially from the investment point of view, I don't believe that this is the right time to be reviewing the VAT, because it's part of the recommendations that the IMF also mentioned.
But also, too, we've been getting signals from the FIRS that there will be some review and changes around the tax regime. But one of the things is it increasing the tax base, or it actually increasing the tax, which hasn't been coherent as of yet. We were talking about that last week. And do you have any can you share any?
So there's an alternative view, right? Which, because if you put it in context, I think the study, please keep me honest, Mr. Yusuf, there's a study that shows that the effective tax rate across the sort of, if you look at the base of taxpayers and sort of like corporate profits, the effective tax base, I think, is about 6%. Nominal tax rate is about 35%, right? And then when you're at 6%, there's something seriously wrong. And the argument has been that there's a lot of loopholes, which ironically is being enjoyed more by the, sort of like the top, say, companies in the economy. So, because I think what's that statistic that about, maybe 100 companies account for like 80% of the tax collected in the country and what have you. And there has been an argument that perhaps the thing to do is indeed to eliminate some of these tax loopholes and drop instead the sort of the tax rate such that, so say for example, if you went from like say 35 to 20% and then blocked some of these loopholes that we have proven unable to manage, perhaps that might yield sort of a better result for everybody all round, because that way you get more people paying taxes, you eliminate all the sort of like the corruption and all the attendant issues that go with maladministration of these sort of allowances and what have you. I mean, I know definitely as a business person, I would immediately apply for its pioneer status if I have a business that qualifies for it. I'm not going to waste 1 second because it makes a big difference. But I think from the point of view of the nation's sort of like revenues, an option would be to sort of, like consider lowering the tax rate and then blocking some of these loopholes. And it then might end up being a win-win for everyone.
I want to pick up on what you said about things that benefit the rich. One of the things that has consistently been pointed out, which was also pointed out in this report, which is no new news to us, is fuel subsidy. People believe that fuel subsidies really benefit people at the top, which is people that drive 4x4s, people that drive cars people that have multiple cars that take 5 different people in 5 different directions. They're the ones really benefiting from fuel subsidy. One of the things that has been consistent on this show, and people thought would be part of the political debate during the elections, is the removal of fuel subsidy. But obviously that's political suicide, so that didn't come up during the discussions and the debate. When you look at things that benefit the rich, how do you feel about fuel subsidy and what needs to be done? What is the bravery that needs to be done when it comes to the brave thing that needs to be done when it comes to fuel subsidy?
Okay, this is probably something that I feel fairly strongly about. I think the way I would think about the fuel subsidy is, the word that comes to my mind is, it is actually irresponsible. Having it is actually what I consider it actually irresponsible. Okay. I cannot think of a more irresponsible way to fritter away a country's resources than this fuel subsidy thing, for the simple reason that when you think about the alternative applications of the funds. Now, I say that, and I know it's a very simplistic view, because removing it does not automatically guarantee that it is channeled towards more productive applications. But in and of itself, I think it is an incredibly irresponsible thing to do, simply because, you can use this money so much more. 2 things, for example. I mean, the one that everybody talks about very often is obviously applying it to, sort of more productive things like, development of infrastructure and so on and so forth, or even development of social capital. But even if you were to take this subsidy and target it towards social, transfers, like conditional cash transfers and what have you, I think this is by far of a greater benefit to an economy than subsidizing someone like myself who can more than adequately afford it. You know, it just completely boggles the mind. So when people talk about the political implications, I honestly do not think the political implications are that significant beyond the fact that, you know, the illicit flows, I would call it, that are able to be sort of sustained from it, you know, become...
Once again, benefiting a very
small
group of people.
I struggle with it. But so I've spent a bit of time thinking about this whole fuel subsidy thing. And I think for some, beyond the sort of the political whatever on autonomy, I think there is a fundamental worldview that needs to be addressed. This concept that, oh, we produce it and therefore we should benefit from it, is such an incredibly ridiculous argument, because we produce tomatoes, we don't subsidize tomatoes. We produce onions, we don't subsidize onions. You know, so many things that we produce locally. We produce timber, we don't subsidize, and so on and so forth. I mean, I could go on. So why are we subsidizing this particular one? Why not take the revenues from it and apply it to much more meaningful, or rather save the cost, not take the revenue, save the cost from it and apply it to much more productive things, you know.
So how would you propose that this subsidy be removed? I know that the federal government responded yesterday saying that, yes, they've heard from the IMF and they will remove the subsidy, but gradually.
Why?
Because, I mean...
We removed it from diesel. Did the world come to an end? Diesel is no longer subsidized.
One of the minister, Zainab, the finance minister, one of her concerns was that, you know, there has to be some sort of education of the people, and also what the replacement will be, the replacement of the subsidy will be. I'd like to have your take on that.
The thing is that clearly, economically, it is not a sustainable way of managing an economy. And it has affected the entire oil and gas sector, because the investment that we are supposed to have in that sector, we are not getting. Apart from the issue of the leakages and the misapplication on from the perspective of the subsidy, we are shutting out a lot of investment. We are perhaps the only oil-producing country that don't have functioning refineries. We are spending between $7 to $8 or $9 billion annually to import petroleum products, refined petroleum products. Imagine what that can do to all this issue of macroeconomic stability. Imagine what that can do to the issue of our foreign reserves. Imagine what that can do even to our foreign exchange rate. That's in addition to the fact that all the private investment that normally should have come to that space has not come. Because how do you have such a huge sector, which is supposed to be a cash cow, and you don't have private investors there? Because of your pricing policy. Now we don't have a single refiner that is private. It's only Dangote now that is struggling to come up. And Dangote, I mean, for strategic reason, is in the export processing zone. So it has done a lot of damage. And this is the model that brought Venezuela to where it is today. This populist approach that is going to hurt the masses and all of that. So I think there has to be very serious engagement with labor. Because the thing is that some of these things are also very difficult to communicate to the ordinary people, unfortunately. It is very easy for somebody to just jump over and say, okay, all this issue about deregulation, subsidy, is to punish the poor. It's very easy to sell. And unfortunately, even the IMF has a terrible reputation. I don't know where that is coming from.
It was stopped.
Once IMF is part of a discussion,
structural adjustment is part of it.
It becomes very difficult to sell.
They don't have a good record.
Now they are hanging all these fuel subsidy thing now on the IMF. You know, without looking at the merits of the entire thing. Of course, we are spending close to £1 trillion.
Can I chip in something real quick? Let's not forget also, I do agree with, Sir Yusuf, about the sort of the political, but don't let's forget that we have actually done this fairly successfully in this country in the past. If you think about PTF, which ironically the current president managed, the funding of PTF came essentially from removal of subsidy. I don't know if you recall. The subsidy actually came from removal of, the funding. And whether you like it or not, PTF, I think, did a lot of good stuff. I mean, forget the politics of it. PTF actually did a lot of good stuff around the country, around roads and water and just basic infrastructure, the sort of thing we're talking about. So that is a case study in Nigeria. This is not Senegal, this is not, it's a case study in Nigeria of how you can actually use these resources. Now, because it was under military government, of course, it was a lot easier. And, if you wanted to protest, I mean, you were risking your life and all of that. So that was that. So we have precedents in terms of managing this whole thing. And we should address our minds to how we can do that. Not because, I don't think we should even wait for IMF to tell us this thing. We should remove and I agree, IMF does carry a bit of baggage when it comes to, sort of like seeming anti-people policies. But we should separate it from IMF and say, this is what we as a country want to do, want to use our resources towards better ends. And I think that's how we should think about it.
What about the adverse effect of the removal of the subsidy? Because I know that yesterday the Nigerian Labour Congress also said that, this removal will obviously cause a fuel hike and more hardship for Nigerians. What's your take on that?
And what I would like to add to that is, and which immediately caused fuel queues at stations. And so I think more of what I want you to address here is the use of language, is the language we're using. One of the things the minister said right away is, what do we replace it with? So right away, we're already preempting what's going to happen if you remove the fuel subsidy. And I think what I want you to talk about more of, what do we need to see from language, from body language, from actual rhetoric when it comes to fuel subsidy, and how do we start to get a groundswell around this removal of fuel subsidy?
Unfortunately, this fuel subsidy issue is a very contentious issue. And it has been like that for over 10, 15 years. So in terms of language, I think what is important is to communicate better the benefits of creating an environment where the private sector investment will play more role. As we speak now, NNPC is the only supplier of petroleum products in the country. NNPC. Even the components of the petroleum product that have been deregulated, in quote, the private sector players cannot invest because NNPC is competing with them in that space. NNPC has better access in terms of forex and the rates at which they get. They also have advantage in terms of using crude to swap to import some of these products. So they have practically shut out the private sector in that space. And unfortunately, we don't have a reputation of quality state public sector institutions. If you had quality state institutions as we have in China and all of that, perhaps we can live with it. But in this context, in our own environment, when you leave such strategic things in the public sector space, the damage to the economy and to the welfare of the people will be horrendous. And it's like we are destroying tomorrow by the way we manage today. That is what is happening. So I think the conversation has to happen more with labor. It's very important. We had this problem as far back as when Oshomole was the president of NLC. He rode on the popularity of this fuel subsidy even to achieve a lot of things. Of course, it is good news to the ordinary man. But down the road, we are going to pay for it. In fact, we are already paying for it. Because if you had done this some 10 years ago, we'll have a lot of private investors in the oil and gas sector, in the downstream. We will not be grappling with the issue of turnaround maintenance today, turnaround maintenance tomorrow, and yet the refineries don't work, and they're not likely to work. And unfortunately, even under the present administration, there is no clear commitment to pull back the public sector from this space, which is unfortunate. because other sectors of the economy are suffering from this. Infrastructure challenges are there. The non-oil sector of the economy cannot move the way it should move because there is no infrastructure. And where do you get the money to fix infrastructure? You can't continue to borrow because the structure of the budget now is that almost the entire capital component of the budget is funded from borrowing. It is not sustainable. And this, dealing with this oil and gas sector is very, very central to moving this economy forward. You have the PIB bill, which is still sitting on the table of the president. It's a major policy document that can be a game changer for this economy. But the government also needs to show commitment to this. I know that there are a lot of vested interests because people are making tons of money from the current arrangement. But we need to look beyond that and look at the larger picture and try as much as possible to educate the people. Of course, there will be some pains, no doubt. There will be some pains. But it's a question of cost and benefit at the end of the day. Are you going to have a net cost or a net benefit? But I believe that the benefit ultimately will be huge for this economy. And the citizens, the government also needs to build trust. Because part of the problem we have had with some of these critical reform measures is the deficit in trust. People don't trust those who are governing the space.
So if you were to think about it, I completely agree with you. I completely agree with you. To the issue of communication, it's actually very, very interesting and ironic again. If I were in this administration, I would actually say that the best person to manage the communication is, interestingly, is actually the president. For a couple of reasons. One, it has become obvious from the last election that his support base is actually these masses that are supposed to suffer the most from this, which, again, I do not believe is the case at all. I think they suffer more in the medium and the long term from this thing that we're doing. So it would be the president directly taking his message, in my view, to the people. I think on one level, Labour can be quite pragmatic when it comes to it. If you look them in a room, and you can actually have a meaningful discussion with Labour and get somewhere. And I know that from from experience. But more important, I think the president needs to directly address the people. My fellow Nigerians, my supporters, this thing doesn't make sense. We're actually damaging ourselves. So long as he himself is convinced, that's the starting point. My fellow Nigerians, this is not a good way to spend our money. Let me take this money and hand it to the poorest of you directly and use some of it to actually build roads and hospitals and schools for you, the way I did when I was leading the PTF. I think that's the kind of communication we need around this thing. And once you break the back of it, there's no going back. Then all the benefits that Mr. Lawal spoke about, we will see, I'm sorry, Mr. Yusuf spoke about, we will see them. All the benefits, because I have been a player in the oil and gas sector, in the downstream and what have you, and I do know that, yes, the subsidy regime is always a thing that keeps people on the, I know, sort of having run a downstream oil and gas company for a number of years, that there were investments we didn't make because we just didn't know which way the subsidy regime was going. The foreign investors that would look at the market and say, no, the subsidy regime is such that makes it, uninteresting or unattractive for anybody to invest. So it's a huge thing, yeah.
I want to pick up on that. So you're talking about foreign investors, you're talking about investments, you're talking about the president's communication. The president is going into his second term. He has a mandate now to continue to manage this economy. As a principal investor, as someone that is constantly talking to investors, one of the challenges we've had around investment in Nigeria is around FDI, the decrease in FDI, and the continued almost manipulation of our economy with foreign portfolio investors. I would like to understand from your perspective what you would like to see different when it comes to communication, when it comes to body language, when it comes to posturing, and what we need to do differently to attract FDI, and what this type of report means to foreign direct investors.
I don't know if I should let Mr. Yusuf go first.
No, go first, because you're a principal investor.
No, you see, if I may just say.
Please.
Now, when we talk about investment, and that is one mistake that we often make most of the time, the investors that are driving this economy today in terms of job creation, in terms of capital formation, are the domestic investors. And they are the domestic investors. So this is why sometimes when I look at some of our policies, particularly monetary policy, there is so much emphasis on manipulating or coming up with rates so that you can attract portfolio investors. Part of the reasons we have the high interest rate regime we have today is to attract portfolio investors.
It benefits them.
And it's hurting the domestic investors. Now, how will an investor now borrow money at the current rate to invest in manufacturing, for instance, to invest in agriculture, to invest in transportation, to invest in property, to invest in construction? It is simply not possible at the current interest rate. Meanwhile, we have these portfolio investors coming in and all. And the unfortunate thing is that portfolio funds are very volatile funds. They are not stable. They live at the very moment that you even need them the most. So we need to change the orientation that we have about investment. The emphasis of investment should be on those who are here. Foreign direct investment, domestic direct investment. Because that is where we can solve a lot of social problems that we have. All this unemployment, security problems, terrorism, they also have a relationship with the way we manage the economy.
Direct.
And the amount of, the kind of environment we create for investors. Because it is investors that will encourage, that will employ these people. But if you have a policy regime, either on the fiscal side or the monetary side, that is not focusing sufficiently on domestic investment, then we are not getting it right. So I believe that we should be focusing more on what we make domestic investors comfortable. If they are comfortable, foreign investors will come. And we should also encourage, of course, foreign direct investors. Exactly. Because they are here to stay. If you come as a foreign investor and you set up a factory and all of that, if anything goes wrong, we are not going to move the factory away. The factory will be there and we'll see how we sort it out together. But if you are building your foreign reserve, building your everything on the back of portfolio investors, at the slightest shake of confidence, this capital will fly out. They create more instability in the system. So, as a strategy of policy, I think the emphasis should be more on that, particularly on the monetary policy side.
Monetary policy.
Because it is not easy for investors to relate with the financial system as we speak, either from the point of view of the cost of fund and even the tenor of funds.
And the interest rate.
Interest rate, yeah. Hardly can you get funds that will be 5-10 years. Of course, there are issues about these development banks and all, they are doing their best. But that is not a substitute for a financial system that will support investors and investment and entrepreneurs. It's not a substitute. So that is what we should have.
Yeah. So I completely agree with that. I think on the monetary side, a lot of the work around crowding out of sort of like the productive sectors of the economy needs to be very seriously addressed. And again, part of it is going to be addressed by addressing things like the interest rates, which, if government is selling T-bills at, whatever,
at 17%
you're effectively shutting out a lot of people and so on and so forth. There are things you can do about the cash reserve ratio, which someone was pointing out to me yesterday, the asymmetry in the cash reserve ratio such that, ends up blocking funds that should otherwise be available for lending and so on and so forth. So there's a whole bunch of things around that which I think has been
about the CRR before.
But there's one thing as well that I have said at different fora which we do need to put a lot of emphasis on. There are quite a number of investor friendly policies on the books. And to be fair to the likes of the Minister for Trade and Industry, the likes of the current head of NIPC, there's been quite a bit of work that's been done around that. But I think we are still quite behind in terms of capacity to execute on a lot of things, of this whole ease of doing business thing. I think there's still a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of creating the capacity to actually deliver.
Give us an example of the type of work.
So for example, rather let me talk about sort of the desired end state.
Okay.
You understand? So how quickly can I register a business? How quickly can I get permits? How quickly can I get licenses? You understand? These the sort of things they've been trying to do work around. How easy can I get visa on arrival? You know, I've had a partner sent back at the airport.
To get specifics is because we've also interviewed the head of the ease of doing business, and one of the actual wins for them is this visa on arrival. And so to hear you now say this, that's why I want to understand where is the work needs to be done. So visa on arrival is obviously another place we need to sort of go back and pry and really find out more of what's happening and why that's happening, because that was basically one of their big wins when they were
you see,
here.
that's the thing, because the fact that you now have it in place does not mean it is working the way it is. I know I have gotten visa and I've gotten visa on arrival in Kenya. It's never been an issue. Like 2-3 times I've walked into Nairobi, I've gotten visa on arrival. It's never been an issue. But here you can still get a situation where someone shows up and because of one thing or the other, it's like, no, you have to go back. Guess what? This guy is an investor representing a multi-billion-dollar private equity firm, and you're turning him back at the airport. He's not a criminal coming to steal money or carry drugs. You understand what I'm trying to say? You don't send people like that back in any serious economy. You know, this is not about preferential treatment or anything. It's just about common sense. Okay? So there's a whole bunch of things that, you know, there's work that's being done. Like, that's why I said the policies are already in place. It's just cranking up very, very significantly the ability to actually execute and institutionalize and let it not be subject to the whims and caprices of some official at the point of contact. You know, there's a lot of improvement, no doubt about it, but we're still not quite there yet. And I just picked
it's actually
trivial examples. I think we need, you know, like it applies in bigger things. How long does it take to get pioneer status, for example, and so on and so forth.
It's very cumbersome,
these are the kind
I know
of
that.
things that, you know, we need to address.
And talking about the ease of doing business, we have a lot of engagement with the PEBEC office, like Dr. Oduwole. And I can testify that they're doing a whole lot.
We've interviewed
a whole lot. But again, you know, the context in which we're operating also matters.
Sure.
Because if you are talking of changing a system, I mean, we are talking of the bureaucracy, for instance. We are talking about entrenched interests that have been there for several years. It's not so easy. Yeah, it's not.
Policies
yes.
are inhibiting us.
And now you have people who are beneficiaries.
Yes.
From all the status quo, even though it's not benefiting the majority of people. So there will be pockets of resistance to this. So that is why perhaps the speed of accomplishment has been a bit slow. But I know that there's a lot of work that is going on. There's a lot that is being done. For instance, the Kamar Amendment Bill is currently on the table of the president. It is here to be signed. In fact, in the Chamber of Commerce, we have to write to the president. We are waiting for this bill to be signed because it's going to impact a lot on small businesses. All the small issues that they have to deal with in process of documentation, registering business, and all of that. All those concerns are being removed. So we need to appeal to the president using this platform to please quickly also sign the Kamar Amendment Bill, which is currently sitting there, you know. And talking about also, let me go back to the issue of revenue.
Please.
Because revenue is one of the biggest problems that we have. And over the years, we have seen that there are some government revenue generating agencies that are really sitting on gold, as it were. They are not bringing to the table the kind of revenue that they should bring to the table. You know, imagine, for instance, if an NPC was a private company. Imagine the kind of money.
Sorry, I'm going to interrupt you there. That was part of the discussions that were had during the last election. And that became a rallying call for the opposition, for APC to say, look at what PDP wants to do, which is privatize an NPC. Why do you think that that also, once again, resonated with the president's base, as in saying they don't want to privatize an NPC, when you look at the way people came out in the press in opposition against privatizing an NPC? it hasn't been the first time we've heard about privatizing government assets or selling government assets, but there was an immediate attack, and it caught on like wildfire. When you say, what if an NPC was a private company, why is that not resonating when people hear that?
You see, there are issues. First, that was a political season.
Sure.
So it is very easy to do. Then secondly, there are some major economic reform endeavors that are vulnerable to that kind of coloration or characterization, that this is another attempt to sell or to give away public assets. Now, again, it borders on education. Because it is very easy to tell the ordinary man that these capitalists want to hijack the assets and go with it. Even though these assets or these corporations are a lot of burden on everybody. But the citizens don't know that. But they know that they don't have public schools. They know that there are issues with public health institutions. They know that there are no roads. They know that the security agencies have issues of funding and so on. They don't know where this is coming from. So it's a lot of education. Sometimes, just as I said, it's also very difficult to communicate this. But one of the challenges or functions of leadership is not about the popularity of decisions. You take the decisions that will benefit the people, but the people may not know that will benefit them. So as a leader, you have to take some decisions, even if it's not popular. And sometimes the best decisions are not the popular decisions in this situation. So that is why I say, well, I can understand the kind of resistance that came up with. But we have models that have worked. We have the NLNG. NLNG, government has about 49%. The private investor have 51%. And we can see the kind of dividend that NLNG is bringing to the coffers of government. We can see the kind of tax that they are bringing to the coffers of government. So the same thing with NNPC. We are not saying, okay, you may not sell everything. You can retain about 49%, sell the 51%, and let us see quality management in the process. The issue is about management, to get value for the people of this country. Because this is a public asset. And the best way to get the best value is to get quality management there. Unfortunately, the public sector's arrangement or structure cannot deliver the kind of management that can give value. Unfortunately, it's not so much about the people. We have some of the best brains also in government. But the totality of the system cannot allow you to function because it's not a merit-driven system. You know?
Give us some more, I mean, I don't want you to lose this train of thought around revenue. So
yes, I was talking about some of these agencies really that can bring a lot to the table. There was a time when the budget assessment was being done. The biggest shortfall in terms of revenue came from what we call the independent revenue. Independent revenue head are revenue that is supposed to come from the agencies of government that are generating revenue. Sometimes, to even get some of them to even defend their budget in the National Assembly was a whole lot of work. They don't show up. It took the intervention of the president himself last year to get some of them to show up at the National Assembly to defend their budget. So there's a lot of transparency issues. Unfortunately, some of those who also sit on those prioritizers are also politically powerful people. So to get the right kind of value from these institutions is a major challenge. And it's one area that the government also needs to look at. Should be looking more at things like NEMASA, NPA, Central Bank, NNPC, and quite a whole lot of them. Look at what happened in JAMB. JAMB is just a small fry within the context of all of this. But look at how, because we had a new registrar, we had almost a 200 or 300% increase in the revenue remittance to the Federation account. What has been happening all these years? And you can replicate that example in many of those of these institutions of government that are revenue generating. So if you look critically at those institutions, I'm sure the impact on revenue will be much more than what we have right now.
Kamar, any additions to the revenue conversation or the NNPC conversation?
No. I mean, I totally agree. You know, you can't block all those loopholes simply by just, you know, like rejigging the management, selling down your stake on, you know, in some of these things and handing control over to a more competent manager. It's a model that has been shown to be successful around the world.
PE firms, that's what they do.
Yeah,
which is basically that's how you have to run a.
And even the petroleum industry bill, it's all about that. It's about how you can get these institutions to function well, particularly in the oil and gas sector. And this is a bill that a lot of stakeholders have been part of to ensure that we get value from this sector.
I'd like to switch up a little bit and get a sense from you. With President Buhari's second term, communication has been a key identifier from both of you that this president needs to communicate more and better. You even from your desk, you've had to send appeals to the president to please sign the Kamar bill. These are, I mean, and the inefficiency of the 8th National Assembly, especially when it comes to bills and assenting those bills, have been one of the big criticisms that we've actually addressed on this show. One of my concerns, and what I would like you to tell me about is, as you see this president enter into his second term, one of the things that we've talked about here was government-backed guarantees as a way of also sort of spurring the economy on for infrastructure growth and infrastructure investments. What are some of the things this president needs to do differently than what he did last term, especially in getting this economy growing? Nigeria, the projections for Nigeria literally is between 25 and 3%. Everyone says Nigeria needs to be growing at a double-digit rate, especially when you look at our population growth. I want to know, what are some of the quick wins that this president can put in place to just get this economy moving again?
Well, first, we need to ensure that we deploy the right people to the right places. That is very important.
So does that mean you would like to see a shake-up in his cabinet?
Well, perhaps a shake-up. Perhaps a more reallocation of powers. I'll give you an example. The vice president is the head of the economic team under this administration. The vice president is the chairman of PEBEC, a Presidential Enabling Business Environment Council. We have regular conversations with the office of the vice president. And I have no doubt in my mind that the vice president's office and the team have very clear understanding of what needs to be done, following from all the engagement that we have. So I imagine that if the VP's office, because for managing the economy, you need a rallying point. You need a powerful personality within government. It could be the president himself. It could be the kind of model we had when we had Okonjo-Iweala. It could be the vice president. But you need somebody who is very well informed about issues of the economy, who will be the rallying point on issues of economic policies. I mean, with due respect, the few times that the VP had acted as president, some of the key reforms that you had was when he acted as president. It was a long debate to get the I&E window, investment and exporters window, to come into place. Because there was this feeling that exchange rate, you should not tamper with it, you should not do this, you should not do that. And there's a lot of clamor for a market window for the exchange rate management. And you can see the difference that that window brought to this economy. Since it was created, it has brought in over 20 billion US dollars. So if you have more powers as far as economic management is concerned, residing with the economic team led by the vice president, I think that will give to make a whole lot of difference. And when you have that kind of thing, you don't exempt any ministry. Whether you are NNPC, whether you are central bank, whether you are customs, you must subject yourself to that economic management team led by somebody who actually understands the economy. Because it's a management thing. And management is not about the leader knowing everything. No. It's about the leader ensuring that you deploy the right people to the right places. And they will get the job done for you. The system is not short of people that can make things work. It's a question of ensuring that we deploy the right people to the right places. So there will be better communication between the stakeholders of the economy and those who are managing the economy. Right now, that communication is not deep enough. It's not deep enough because, I mean, you talk about the issue of privatization and all of that. People throw in all sorts of sentiments into it. And if you don't have good economic managers to guide the president and the nation, we will not make any progress. The president, as it is, doesn't have an economic advisor. There's no economic advisor in the office of the president. All these things are still revolving around the office of the vice president. If that is the case, let us throw in more powers there so that we get a lot of things done. Then we need to look at our regulatory institutions. Sometimes the regulators can be a big burden on investors. You see some of them, you don't know whether they are regulators or they are revenue-generating agencies. In the kind of pressure they put on investors. You need the right regulatory environment to encourage investment. Because some people in government have this narrow view that investment is about people wanting to make money for themselves or make money for their pockets. That is a very wrong notion. Because it is investment that you use as an instrument to achieve even social objectives of job creation, of revenue generation, of economic inclusion. It is investors you need. I mean, there's a limit. I mean, if Dangote, for instance, has additional revenue of maybe $10 billion, he's not going to be thinking of, new clothes to buy or new cars to drive or new houses to build. He'll be thinking of more investment to do. And the opportunity for investment is limitless. And an average entrepreneur has very high propensity to invest. The more money they make, the more they invest. And as their investment grows, the more people they will employ. So that is the mindset. I think those who are in government should also bring into relationship with investors. You know.
I want to bring us back to this fuel subsidy issue. I know we just touched on the language for the leaders, the president, to educate Nigerians on the adverse effect of the fuel subsidy. But I want to hear from you. I mean, with the fuel subsidy removed, and then there's a height in fuel scarcity, and there's also the hike in fuel prices. How does that affect the economy when that happens?
Well, let's understand the impact of petroleum products on the economy. He alluded to it earlier. For those who run factories, the major fuel that they use is AGO. AGO currently is deregulated. So even when we are talking about impact on investors, the AGO has more impact on manufacturing, on factories, on offices, even more than the PMS. Because it's AGO that you use to power your generator. Once you have a big generator, it's diesel you use. All these trucks that move raw materials from factory, from the ports, from everywhere, they are not running on petrol, they are running on diesel. Diesel is deregulated. So in terms of the impact on the economy, even some diesel even have more impact on economic operations. Now, the PMS, if it is deregulated, of course, it can lead to a spike in petroleum products. I mean, particularly in PMS. Again, the spike is a function of, first, what is the international price of crude? Because it's also very, that is what happens abroad. Once the price of crude goes up, the pump price will go. When it comes down, the pump price comes down. So we are likely to see that kind of changes, yes, or volatility in the space. Then secondly, we expect that if you do that, the resources that you save from that, you should be able to invest more in mass transit, in railway system. I mean, how much is Lagos-Ibadan rail? I think it's about $2 or $3 billion. And we are spending about $7 billion annually to import petroleum products. That tells you the kind of difference, the kind of savings that we can make to fix some critical infrastructures in the system. And beyond that, we are likely to see more local refineries. Right now, we don't see them because of this pricing problem. So we are losing jobs, we are losing investments. So if we refine more locally, the price will not be as bad as it is. We will not be as vulnerable to shocks, external shocks, as we're experiencing it now. Because you have the crude, it's a question of having the investment here. They will refine the crude and they will sell to us. And that will reduce the prices in a way. But again, this will not happen immediately. We need to create the environment first, generate the confidence, then investors will come. And once we have more people in that space, we have more petroleum products that will be available to the people. And this will also affect prices. We will even be exporting refined petroleum products, which generate more value. And when you refine, it's not only petrol that you are getting from it. You get a whole lot of products that can benefit all the other sectors of the economy. All these chemical products, petrochemicals, plastic raw materials, and all of that. All these things are products of the refining process. We are spending a whole lot of foreign exchange importing those things even as we speak. So when we are talking about deregulation of these sectors and attracting investment, it's not just about increasing the price of PMS. There's a whole lot of benefits that will come to this economy if we get it done. So that we don't start blackmailing government or blackmailing policymakers once they say that they want to remove subsidy or they want to deregulate. We need to be a bit more honest in the way we do things. Right. We do not say that because we want to, score cheap points and all of that, and begin to feed the people with wrong information. That is not fair to the people.
There's also the issue of mismanagement of the excess crude savings account as well. I think the Finance Minister also mentioned that yesterday or Friday that, the excess crude account has been mismanaged. Even the IMF also said that.
Yeah, which is what we talked about earlier, which is the fact that money has been taken from there without the approval of the National Assembly, which is a constitutional issue, which we discussed. What I want us to do, though, is since I feel like we've beaten the oil subsidy today, I wanted to talk about more of some of the interest rates regime, and also actually monetary policy and our foreign exchange discussions that we've had. One of the things that was pointed out in the report was, once again, some of CBN's actions around this tight monetary control system. What do you think needs to happen to the Naira in this new administration, especially to spur on investors coming in and local investment when we look at the current regime around the Naira and the fact that we are artificially supporting the Naira?
Well, first on the comments of the IMF around the CBN and monetary policy. The IMF called for sustenance of the tightening of monetary policy to be able to deal with issues of inflation and maybe manage the exchange rate. I don't quite support that, because I believe that the tightening of monetary policy has penalized, to a great extent, domestic investors because of the rate at which it was pushing up interest rates. That is one argument. Then there was also this argument about the multiplicity of exchange rates.
Fair enough.
That is also not a good thing for an economy, because we are talking about revenue. One of the ways you can also generate revenue is from what you call exchange rate surplus from the Central Bank of Nigeria. The Central Bank is sitting on a whole lot of our foreign exchange that comes in. If we are putting that to the market, you can also generate more revenue for the Federation account if you are putting it out at the right rate. You make more money. You cannot have a situation where the market rate is 360 and officially we say that the exchange rate is 306. When you have this kind of gap, all sorts of things happen.
And the budget is based on 306.
Budget is based on that. You also shorten the revenue of government. Because the revenue that should come from exchange rate surplus should be much more than that if you are using the right kind of exchange rate. So when we are looking for revenue, rather than harassing those of us who are already paying the taxes, these are areas that you can also look at. And that can give you a lot of money if you put the foreign exchange that is coming to CBN, putting in the market at the right rate. A lot of revenue can come to government. So we need to deal with issues of the multiplicity of exchange rates. Then the IMF also talked about the CBN getting too much involved in intervention funds. Intervening in agric, in rice, in cassava, in textiles, you know. Sometimes you get to a point you begin to wonder whether the CBN
is a bank.
It's just another development bank to be dealing with all this. Because some of those things also get too much in terms of the effort that the CBN is putting into it. What I think is desirable is to create a financial system that works holistically, in a systemic way. Not a financial system that will now create room for the CBN to be intervening in so many places. In how many sectors will you intervene? And if you are not careful, the CBN will abandon its core responsibilities and turn itself into a development bank, which is not. Of course, it's not out of place if there are what we call market failures. Because market failures is what areas in which the market cannot deliver, and you have intervention. That is fine enough. But that should not be a substitute for what the financial system should be doing for the economy. Because right now, we don't have the right kind of synergy or linkages or interface between the financial system and those who are real investors in this economy. We don't have it. Just as he said the other time, practically 80% of the savings in this economy are going to treasury bills. Yeah. How do you grow an economy that way? The economy cannot, because investment in treasury bills is not going to give you jobs.
I do want to ask you a question, and based on what he raised, which is that if you're in an environment in which there are all these intervention funds, and these funds are single digits interest rate, but the overall macro environment you're in is still a high double-digit interest rate. How much benefits is it actually to the environment? Because if your generator that you've loaned money for and you're paying on is at 26%, but then your agri project is at 9%. How is this affecting our economy?
Well, I mean, for one, definitely I'll take it, first of all. I mean,
sure. You take what you can.
I'll take it.
Yes.
So make no mistake about that, I'll take it, because hopefully... but, you know, one thing that this highlights more than anything else is we need to go back and look at how to improve the effectiveness of a lot of existing structures and institutions that we have in place. If anything, in my view, and Mr. Yusuf mentioned the whole sort of market failures, I think a lot of this thing we haven't even reached the point of market failures often. This is just really very bad sort of, we have allowed existing institutions like BOA, you know, the Bank of Agriculture, the Bank of Industry, the Development Bank of Nigeria, a lot of these things that were set up to do these things. Okay, we have, for example, a federal, you know, like a federal mortgage bank. We have a federal housing authority. So many of these things that exist. But I'm sorry, with all due respect, we need to really go back and look at the capacity of these organizations and structures to actually deliver.
But CBN has undermined them, basically.
But that's precisely the thing, because by the time you end up with a lot of political appointments, you end up with a lot of like really poor quality sort of, you know, like compromised sort of like system. And again, I say this, I know that there are many, many fine professionals and individuals that I personally know as some of these various institutions. So this is absolutely no commentary on their competencies or abilities. But as organizations, this is where a government needs to sit down and say, how can I get things done? And one of the ways to get things done is to look at the organs and the structures I have available to me and say, how well are they working? I fix those things and everything proceeds from there. Otherwise, you will run all these unsustainable intervention programs. The world is unsustainable. So you have the 1 year, you put out $200 million, you put out $500 million for intervention. What are you going to do next year? What are you going to do the year after? If, on the other hand, you built a robust organization, it will sustain itself. You put in place a proper board, you put all these things in place. This is what countries that succeed do. Think about it. If you go to Singapore, the reason Singapore works is because if you go to the equivalent, of our Bank of Industry, you will find first-class professionals. You've had first-class structures and processes working there. That is what we should be doing. This whole heroic interventions and what have you are not sustainable. People take them, and that is the end of it. Do you see where I'm going? Yeah.
And where you have sectors and they don't have infrastructure to function, and you continue to throw money at them, money will not solve the problem. You can solve one or two micro issues, but in a systemic and holistic way, we still be grappling with a lot of problems. Wow. So we need to, there should be a bigger emphasis on creating an environment that allows businesses to function, rather than thinking that when you throw money at agric, throw money at the rice farmers, throw money at this, that will solve the problem. It will not solve the problem. We should deal with fundamental issues that will allow for better productivity, economy-wide productivity across sectors. And infrastructure is at the center of all of this.
Always such a pleasure having both of you on. Thank you so much. It looks like, once again, President Buhari has a big mandate ahead of him in creating jobs and getting this economy to move. Thank you for shedding light on some other things that he has to do going forward.
So I cannot live without my parting word. They should develop the capacity to deliver. This government should develop the capacity to deliver. So
if there's one thing this government needs to do is develop the capacity to deliver.
That is it.
We'll have to have you back to expand on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you both.